Thank you. Happy to be here, and for those of you who took my first little class, thanks for showing up for the second. This is definitely a little more of what you asked for. I could do another one on some simple strengthening too, but I thought this presentation was probably best done with stretching. So there's my favorite mountain pose on the front. We'll get to this and we'll do it in sitting down. So I designed this to do mostly sitting at work. I think, we work 8-hour days, some longer, and you sit with a static posture. And so we'll talk about what that does to the muscles and the importance of kind of resetting your muscles and paying a lot of attention to your posture. That's my overall goal, is to talk about posture, but certainly there are many things that lead into posture. Any guesses for one? Time, you mean?
Like an age?
Duration of time? Yep. I think there's a certain amount of your posture which will change with age that you can't do too much about other than being super mindful about the changes that are occurring and try to minimize them.
Ergonomic type stuff?
Ergonomics, so yeah, how you interface with your work area. That would lead me back to probably that awareness of posture to start with. Gravity. So over a length of time doing a certain job, muscles fatigue, and we will assume a posture which maybe we don't realize is getting us out of pain, but that's really what we're seeking. That your nervous system is a very, it's not lazy, but it is always wanting to do the least amount of work possible to get the job done. So that's where that mindfulness comes in, of being aware of your body position while you perform activities. Perfect example, I was working on my truck brakes and was going a little slow, was having some troubles, and I focused more on the task than my body. And then all of a sudden my body said, don't do that anymore. And so I just had to change the position. If you set yourself up for success in terms of where you do your work, that's the best way to kind of avoid one factor in something like low back pain. So there won't be a test, but we're going to do a little anatomy. So we'll talk about muscle anatomy. And so we look at this and we see skeletal muscles. So we'll take the bicep, for example. That is a kind of a long, round muscle, like you see in the picture here. And so that's comprised of smaller units called fascicles. So within the big muscle, there's another group of tissue called fascicles. Within that fascicle, there's fasciculi. So again, we go big muscle, smaller unit, shrink it down to a fasciculi, and within the fasciculi is the contractile tissue of muscle. And those are called actin and myosin fibers. And so if you look at the fiber itself on the lower part, you'll see something called a myofibril, which is a contractile unit. And those are composed of these little things called sarcomeres. And so we're talking within one muscle, there's billions of muscle fibers. They're microscopic. So the way that they work is they're either an all or nothing. So the actin and myosin in the muscle are just these two different proteins, and they're activated by calcium, which is driven by your nervous system. So your brain says, reach out for that coffee cup. And so those actin and myosin proteins with calcium will shorten. So you'll see that little sarcomere shorten. And it will hold as long as there's that chemical reaction going on. And so when we perform static activities like sitting at a desk with our head forward and arms forward, if I were to hold my arms out, how long could I do that before I'm going to get very fatigued in the back and the neck? Not very long. Probably, we did the Stein competition. How long can you hold a beer stein out? Minutes. I think you won it, didn't you? No. Oh. Those forearms ought to have said you're a sure bet. So again, when those sarcomeres contract, this is another interesting thing. We are only born with a certain amount of muscle fiber. So even though you may go to the gym, you cannot increase the amount of muscle fiber you have. You're born with what you're born with. And so what we can do is increase these contractile units within the muscle fiber. In other words, if I got 10 foot of train track and I've got 6 foot of train, I've got 2 feet on either side if my math is correct. And so by resistive weight training, you can add more trains to the track. And what that equals for this myofibril is more ability for that muscle to contract, which is why you see muscles get larger. Does that make sense? It's not that you're adding more muscle fibers, you're adding units of contractile tissue within the fibers you have. I think that's fairly important to understand because when we stretch, we're looking at getting down to these sarcomeres. We're trying to release those actin and myosin proteins to let that contraction go. So static activity equals constant locking of those sarcomeres. And so what will happen when they fatigue? They'll either start to release or they'll build lactic acid. So that is kind of a byproduct of muscle contraction, and now you're kind of using your muscles for what they weren't supposed to be made for. What's the symptom? Ow.
Soreness.
Charlie horse. Well, I got a big lump right there.
Yeah.
And so if we can avoid that, if we can allow those muscles to, because all muscles do is contract and relax. That's all they know. Another interesting fact is, so if I wanted to pick up a coffee cup, again, my nervous system is always wanting to do the least amount of work to get the job done. And so I've picked up that coffee cup before. I know how heavy it is. When these muscle fibers contract, they will contract completely. But it's how many I recruit that is decided by the weight that I lift. In other words, if I just bring my arm up, that takes a certain amount of muscle fibers completely contracting. Those are all in. But if I wanted to do that with 30 pounds, again, I need to recruit more muscle fibers. That just says, again, it's the same for stretching. When you're stretching a muscle, what you're looking to do is get down to those sarcomeres or the muscle fibers that are shorter than the others because either they've been working and they're sore or for some odd reason. Again, we hold muscle tone. If we have pain, usually the nervous system increases the tone in that area as a protective mechanism. So that's the science of stretching. So we'll go on from there. Benefits of stretching, increased flexibility, increased performance, increased range of motion, increased blood flow. It does improve your posture, helps to heal and prevent particularly back pain. It's great for stress relief, and it can be very calming. And so just another thing about back pain, statistically it is the most common reported injury. And so it is probably, again, more sedentary lifestyle that brings low back pain. And so this is my attempt to kind of make you aware of those things. And so do we need to exercise? Probably, yes. That's the number one way to prevent it is to be stronger and to be more flexible. So what is exercise? Walking. Walking is fantastic. And so just a routine of getting out and walking 30 minutes a day. If you did that, you would find that, walking an hour probably isn't that difficult. The stretching piece should be done after physical activity. There is If you're stretching effectively, there's some organs in your tendons in particular that once you've stretched that muscle out, you will get into the tendon, and it will kind of shut down that muscle's ability to contract for about 30 minutes. So just keep that in mind if you're going to go for a run or go for a walk, maybe a warm-up, and then do your activity, and then stretch after that. Stretching throughout the day is fine. I recommend it, as much as you are listening to your body and it's telling you that it needs to be stretched, I would be stretching. Concentrate your stretches on major muscle groups. Again, I designed this to be done at your desk, so stretching the lower extremities to get to the low back, and then stretching really at your upper back and what holds your shoulder blades on your back, because I think that's the biggest complaint is between the low back and the upper thoracic and cervical spine. Stretching both sides. Again, you want to make sure that even if you've got one side that's bothering you, that you're being symmetrical with your stretching, especially for the low back. Again, when we walk, if things aren't balanced, it all happens at the low back. Stretching muscles and joints that you routinely use for your activity. That's why I picked the stretches I did. There's a lot of stretching you can do. We're doing static stretching today, and so static stretching means you are looking to take the muscle to its end length and eventually get into tendon. So that takes a little time. Typically, I think the research says 15 to 60 seconds, which is actually a pretty wide berth there. And so we're going to focus on 30 and 2 to 3 reps of each of those and move to the next one. Don't bounce. So what does a bounce cause? Again, I talked about a unit in the tendon. And so if you activate that, what you're going to do is actually tighten the muscle. And so you'll end up fighting yourself for stretching. So breathing is probably one of the most important things in my mind, because as we have something like pain and we're trying to stretch, that pain is giving us neurological tone that we're not really aware of. And so if you can breathe, that's a really good relaxation technique. It also takes a ton of muscles to breathe. And so if you're breathing with your upper chest muscles and some of your stomach muscles, your diaphragm, that's a great way on breathing out to relax. Let's see what else is on here. If anything is uncomfortable, don't do it. Yeah. Work your way around what's uncomfortable, and then you can always try to come back to it. And if you can't solve it, I would recommend just talking to your doc about it. I think that's all I have to say about that. I'll probably, as we stretch, just kind of throw in some other stuff. So if we look at this handout, these pictures are small, but I think we'll deal with it. The first is a stretch of the hamstring. And so if you guys scoot forward on your chairs, you want your sits bones, we call them, your ischial protuberance is that bone in the bottom. You want that kind of right at the edge of the chair. And so the most important thing about this stretch to me is keeping your low back in lordosis, which means that backward curve. So you can actually place your hand back there. And so when we stretch your hamstring, we should not feel a rounding out of that spine, or we shouldn't feel if you put your thumb and your pinky, spread them apart on your back, you should not feel that distance move, okay? So then you're just going to put your leg forward. And can everybody extend their knee already? That's pretty decent. Okay, how many people are already having a stretch? Yeah. And if you pull your calf back, pull your toes back, you'll feel that kind of multiply, right? And so the stretch would be just to go forward enough so that you feel that burning. And so I wouldn't want you to go farther than what you feel, right? So let that sit there. And so over the next 20 seconds or so, if you could come more forward, do it. I do think that if you are experiencing a lot of pull, again, you just need to be patient because you don't want to activate that thing in the tendon. It's Golgi tendon organ, but again, there will be a test. So, extra point question. So again, we don't want to be folding forward. We don't want to have the neck forward. We want to be up. So, if you can look up at the lights and come forward, oh boy. So what we're going to end up doing if that hamstring's really tight is, again, we want to say, I want to do a good job at this, and we're just going to fold. But we won't be stretching what we want to stretch. All of these muscles, so we'll pull that back because that's obviously been 30 seconds. Things like numbness and tingling moving down your leg, not good. So seek some help. Just kick that out forward. And again, most important thing is your upper body posture. That's the mindfulness piece which I want you to take away, because this should be where you are all the time. Talking to somebody on your cell phone, sitting in your car seat driving, your spine should be in that position right there. If it's not, figure out why. Usually people are not. If it's the car, the kids sit back with the, and so your elbows should be bent to a point where if you have armrests, you can rest your arms on the armrests, and your steering wheel should be up here. If you don't have to put your seat back to get out of your car, most likely it's not adjusted right. Okay, so let's get 30 seconds there. So some of the muscles which we are stretching, most muscles cross two joints. And so you can feel it in the back of your leg, so we know it crosses your knee underneath, but it also crosses up in your hip. Yeah, and so it's attached to your pelvis. And so you want to always think about origin and insertion. So origin is just where the muscle starts, and insertion is where it goes. Okay, we'll come back on that one. The next one, in this picture, the person is leaning forward, which we will do. But again, I want you to be super mindful because this person's head is down and their back is bent. So this is a piriformis stretch. So the piriformis is actually a muscle that moves your hip, and it attaches to your low back. And so it is a deep, deep muscle that's really hard to get to. So this is one of the stretches that'll get you there. So you can actually sit back in your chair. And we're going to make a figure 4 with your leg. And so for me, that's already lighting me up. Jamily Todd. And so just a simple stretch here would be to take your hand and place it on your knee and just try to push that down. And so we're going to do 3 nice deep breaths with this. If you come off the back of your chair, you will ensure that you are activating some core muscles while you do it.
Is that a good thing?
Yes.
Okay.
If you just kind of plop in the chair, you just turned everything off, right?
Yeah, if you sit back.
Okay. So at this point, everybody feel a good stretch pushing down on their knee? So when we come forward, I want you to come forward just at the hip joint. So again, super mindful of keep your shoulder blades pinned back and down, chin tucked, and that arch in your low back. And just come forward a little bit. Yeah. And so if you can't get more forward, what you're going to end up doing is just doing this. And that's something we want to try to avoid. Breathing in and out. And then we're going to switch legs. And so I think there's a total of 9 stretches on here. And so you can pick, obviously, if you've got one that really bothers you, you probably pick that to do a little more often. But as you're sitting at your seat, you got to find some cue to get you to stretch. And it could be you just cut these little pictures and put them somewhere on your desk where you can see them, and you work your way through them during the day. Again, the first thing you want to do is try to flatten that knee out and breathe deep. 30 seconds is the recommended time. And so I mentioned that those little contractile units, that's what we're trying to get to of muscle. And so that's probably what you're going to feel first. And once those muscles release, we're getting into non-contractile tissue, which is tendon. So that's how you can change your posture, is static stretching over time. Okay, we'll take that one off. This next one is done with a chair, and this is probably going to target your low back much more than the seated hamstring stretch. So we're going to do the hamstring stretch again because we don't have enough. Well, if you have a chair and you want to try it, yeah, you can do that.
Or share.
If your hamstring is very tight, it might be extremely difficult to keep your spine in lordosis. And so again, there you go. I wouldn't stretch anymore. I would just focus on this. Yep. And for those of you who do not have an extra chair, just scoot forward again, and we're going to put the leg out. Everybody's got a chair. Look at that.
She is good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy.
Yep.
Is it important to keep your toes up?
If you can pull those toes towards your nose, that's
Oh, gosh.
that's going to be a lot more stretch. Yeah. And so again, if you can keep your low back from rounding out, you can tip forward. I would avoid reaching forward because, again, that's just going to cause flexion. And I would avoid tipping the head down as well. If you're trying to stretch the muscles along your low back, that's a way to do it. But that's really not what I have here. We're trying to kind of spare your low back, be able to have the mobility in your low back to remain with that nice curve in your spine, lordosis. And the way we're going to do it is stretching those really tight leg muscles. Okay, we're going to flip. And forward again. Yeah, so maybe the one that'll help you. Side of the bed, just throw that leg up on the bed. So,
Is there an advantage or how do I want to ask this? Like to release and then go again? Is there some?
So that release and go again would be more of a dynamic stretch.
Okay.
And so dynamic stretching definitely has its benefits. But static stretching is what we're going to use to get to muscle fibers that won't relax without asking everybody to do a bunch of work and then still not getting to those fibers. You can change tissue length over time with these stretches. So in other words, if I stand up and I can't bend down and touch my knees, and I want to be able to, or touch my feet, if I want to be able to do that, it's static stretching, which will get me there. If you have an injury, so you needed a surgery, and they happen to kind of repair a tendon or move or cut muscle, that builds scar tissue. Simply strains or sprains will result in scar tissue. And so what is scar tissue? Collagen and elastin, our tissue's made of that. And so as your body tries to heal that, it invests in that injured area, and it kind of just makes a scrambled chunk of barbed wire of the connective tissue. So it's all stem cells to start with. As time goes on, your body wants to turn it back into what it was. And so we can encourage that by causing those fibers to realign. And that's the stretching piece. Again, repaired tendon is going to be this huge, even on an MRI, you'll see it was repaired because it's dense and it's thick. And so stretching can help to realign those fibers. And so the fibers are meant to be a little bit elastic. So tendon is not very forgiving, but it's made of the same stuff muscle is, and it does stretch to a certain degree. And so again, if you've got chronic pain, chronic limitation, an old injury, which just it's been there 10 years, why not try to address it through a little bit of stretching? If you come to us therapists, that's what we're going to start with, is stretching in a time frame that the doctor allows for something like a tendon or muscle repair. The effects, we'll pull that back. The effects of, again, activating muscle and that idea of that one particular fiber firing all the way. It contracts till its shortest position. It's the same for stretching. When we go to stretch, what we're going to stretch without problem are the muscles that are relaxed, the actual fibers that are relaxed. Like I said, when you pick something up that's heavy, you recruit many more or fire more of those muscle fibers than you would if you're picking something light. When you're stretching, you're going to move through those fibers that are not contracted, and you'll get to the ones that are. So the end range stretch, before you get to tendon, you have to get through all that muscle fiber. And that takes that at least 30 seconds, probably times 2 or 3 reps. But just keep that in mind. It's patience, it's breathing, it's being aware of your posture. So realignment and release of those fibers is the goal in stretching. And you got to just listen to your body, because it'll tell you, we're done with the muscle, now we're into the tendon. So if you end up stretching tendon, we call it, well, it's part of contractile tissue, but you're also probably looking at getting into your joint, which is ligament, which is fine, but it's going to feel a lot different than the other stretches that you're doing. And so I would caution you about overstretching, but if that's what somebody's having you do, then there's a reason for it. What we want to look for in stretching is what's called habituation. Resetting things within your neurological system, which controls your musculoskeletal system. And so again, if you have pain, your nervous system's going to try to protect that area by kind of contracting muscles around it, because it doesn't understand that there's not an injury there. It's just the muscle complaining back that you're using it the wrong way. And so if you can avoid that, I've had this pain for weeks, that usually means, again, it's a chronic state. Anything over 72 hours is now chronic and not acute. And it's posture related, most likely. Most things are in terms of low back pain. We don't have an explanation for most back pain. We do an MRI or a study, and there's nothing there. Even people that have things on an MRI or a study, they don't have back pain a lot of the time. So it is more or less how you use your body throughout the day, your job in particular, because that's what we spend most time doing. And then probably, again, habits of lifestyle. And like I said, you can start out just walking. Take 30 minutes during lunch and walk. It's a nice way to kind of reset during the day. And I see a lot of people out there doing it. So we'll move on to that next one. So we're moving to the upper extremity at this point. And I like this mountain pose so much because it will reset your posture. So we'll do it sitting down. So who remembers the first step of mountain pose? Anybody? There you go. Yes. So just turn your palms forward. And so what you should feel is that your shoulder blades back there are coming together. And then just keep your shoulder blades back and down. The next thing is just tuck your chin. And we want that low back off the chair, and we want it extended. Tighten your core, and that'll help to keep your low back in lordosis. And without bopping your neighbor, we're going to come out to the sides. So a lot of us will start to come forward as we come out to the sides. And that's a sign probably that your chest muscles are too tight. So if you can't stay out to the sides, then that's your stretch right there. And just focus on going back farther. And so who feels a lot of stretch with that across the front of the chest? Take your thumbs and turn them back at that point. You probably feel a little more. And so, again, trying not to fold forward, come up over your head. I'll lose my microphone. And at some point here, we're just going to keep going towards the ceiling. And so for the next 15 seconds, I want you to keep reaching. And who notices you can get your arms up higher and higher? That's because your lower trap muscles, the ones that hook to the bottom of your shoulder blades and go down to your low back, are never stretched like this. And so that's just a great stretch to do throughout the day. And come on back down. And we'll do that one more time. Just static posture. Shoulder blades are kept down, never up. And so where do we get really fatigued and sore? Right here. And so if you can stretch that lower trap, it stops pulling on your shoulder blades so hard that your upper trap and the ones that attach to your back of your neck get a little break. Muscles really like to get long and short, contract, relax. They do not like either doing nothing or working way too hard. And so it may be that we're not working the whole muscle, we're just working a couple of those fibers. And so they start to really complain, and we just feel that little, What it's going to do is get that whole muscle recruiting and firing. And so stretching resets that. Okay? So come out again. Up to the sides. Take a nice deep breath and then go up. And see if you can keep going. Breathe and come down. Okay, so the next one that's on your sheet, we're going to scoot back in your chair, and we're actually going to use the back of the chair as kind of a little lever. And so this is, if you've got a chair that swivels and tips back, careful. Put your helmet on first. You don't need a chair to do these stretches. You can do them sitting on the side of the bed. You can do them on a couch. You can do them in standing, a lot of them. And so just if you're used to the stretches, you'll find yourself stretching anywhere. You put your leg up on the counter, as long as my wife's not around. Okay. So this one, we're going to cross the arms in front of the chest and lean back into the chair. And I don't want you to strain your neck by looking up, but we're just going to put your eyes towards the ceiling and push that chair into the mid-thoracic spine. Who feels a lot of stretch with that? Anybody? Yeah. And so again, this is a good stretch to get out of that forward, shoulders forward, head forward, arms forwards position. Advance of that, because all these stretches can be advanced, would just be to take your two arms and go back and stretch here, or even place your hands behind your back or head. Oh boy. And so if there's nobody in the hall, these are the stretches that I'm doing. I'm doing mountain pose. I'm doing hands behind my head. I had a shoulder surgery less than a year ago. Well, just about a year ago. And I can tell you that shoulder is still extremely tight. And I stretch it every day. So it just takes time. So if you don't have an injury and you're trying to address posture, it is an investment, and it's making it habits. So let's look at the next exercise. So this one, we have one on here for levator scapula stretch. Okay. Want you to be cautious of your neck, okay? We're going to try to stretch some muscles on the upper side here. And so if you turned your head and you placed your head or hand on the top of your head more towards the back side here, you can just gently pull down, just a couple of fingers. And we're pulling forward and down. Make sense? If you close your jaw, you're going to feel more stretch. That's a lot of pulling and burning in my upper neck. Let's try this one a little different. We're going to take the opposite hand and we're going to sit on it. So you're pulling down on your shoulder, you're locking it down, and we're going to turn the other direction now and do the same stretch. Is that a lot more stretch? And I would say again, just a couple of fingers to get the stretch going and leave it there for a little bit. Don't push real hard. Good. We're going to do a leg stretch next. And so I want you guys to stand up and we're going to use your chair. And you can just put a hand on your chair so you got something for balance. And we're going to try to stretch the front of your leg. And so you're going to take probably the leg that the chair side's on and step it forward and put the other one back. And if you've got bad knees, again, you got to modify this. I'll show you it before you decide to do it. We're just going to put that knee down on the floor. And you're going to keep that Thor pose and shift forward. So you feel that stretch on the front of your leg. And so as I do this more, rather than fold forward, I'm actually going to go back and look up. Super important to try to keep your pelvis flat, because if I'm letting my pelvis tilt, I'm not getting the stretch I want. What's the average score out of 10 for stretch on this one? Pretty high?
Pretty high.
Because again, if you sit all day, these guys are constantly in a shortened position. And you can feel what it does to your low back after you've stretched for a little bit. Okay. And we're going to shift legs. Oh boy, that one's tight.
Is your back leg off the floor?
This guy here?
Oh, it's on.
Yeah. And so if you aren't getting much stretch with this, you can reach back and grab that leg.
Oh, I got plenty.
And then don't blame me.
I probably can't even remember. Oh, boy. Charlie horse.
Showing off.
Oh,
teacher.
no way.
Okay.
Let's give you a Charlie horse. I tried that one grab your...
And so some of those muscles we're stretching are the biggest muscles in your body. Some of the smallest muscles in your body are actually spine stabilizers. And so that's why it's so important to stretch those, is because obviously the small muscles are going to lose in a postural battle. And so we want to make sure we're constantly addressing those muscles that attach to your lower extremities and your pelvis. Let's try to pick one we haven't done here. We are going to do robbery stretch. And so we're trying to get to the upper chest muscles and some of the muscles that rotate your shoulders out. So again, we spend all day with these chest muscles short and muscles of your rotator cuff in particular kind of in a really shortened position, lengthened position back here. So the opposite of this is really this, right? So if we go here, we'll have a good idea of actually how far back we can go. This you can do in a door frame. You can do it on a wall, one arm at a time, but you can do it right here. And so there is a strengthening part of exercise, obviously. So we can exercise muscles one of three ways. So we can do the traditional, which means you ask the muscle to get short and then long, short and long. You can keep a load on it with a rubber band or weights or a machine. When a muscle gets short, that's called an eccentric contraction, and we let it back down. Concentric is shortened, eccentric is lengthening. And so if you're injured, eccentric strengthening is a great way to get strong because it protects the tissue, meaning that the most work you'll do is at the start, and then it gets easier, as opposed to resting a lot of work and then back to resting. But this is isometric when I want to talk about this. So we'll come back. I want you to squeeze your hands and then pinch your shoulder blades back there. Just hold them. Who feels that really contracting? And so if you've got postural pain from sitting too much at a desk, most likely it's right where you feel that stuff working. And then go ahead and relax it. And pinch it again. We're just going to hold it 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. And then relax it. This time I want you to try to rotate your arms back as far as you can. Pinch. 1, 2, 3. Relax. And so gym exercises should always be working the same muscles that you're working right here. So how would you do that? So some machines that, and then relax. Machines, if you had a cable, you want to pull the cable back. If you're laying on a bench on your chest, you want to bring the dumbbells back. If you're sitting on a machine that has these arm pieces that go in and out, it's the ones that come out. If you're going to start with exercise, those are the ones that I would start with. Rubber band, pull it out. Try to strengthen the muscles on your back first, because most of us are really over-focused or overbuilt on the front, and then the weakness comes on the back. And so shoulder things in particular, your rotator cuff completely sits on your back here. So we are already built for a lot of strength, internal rotation, or pulling things towards us. These big pecs do all that work. There's nothing on the backside to balance that. And so usually joints are built with a good guy and a bad guy for the motion. So bicep, tricep. Those are probably about equal for strength, but we're not built like that in the shoulders. And so anything that takes your arms out and away from the body or towards the back is something that I would focus on. Guys at the gym want to do curls and bench press. And then you see these shoulder blades, which are popping off their back because there's no muscles holding them down. So posture-wise, too, all this stuff gets super tight. That's why we're trying to stretch all this anterior stuff. Got a couple more on here. So we're going to bring your right arm up, and I want you to try to keep your shoulder blade back. In other words, we're not going to rotate around the chest. Just bring that across your body and reach up This is called a swimmer stretch. And you're trying to push back and towards your left shoulder if you're doing it with your right arm. And so if you rotate, you won't feel much. But if you stay stiff and push, most likely you're going to feel that on the back of your shoulder. And so there's something back there called your posterior capsule. That's ligament. And so when we work all day long in this position, what we're doing is having our humeral head sit forward and slide underneath what's called your acromion. And so it narrows the space in there and is constantly putting a little bit of pressure on your rotator cuff. And so the number one bread and butter of orthopedic surgeons is impinging shoulder. And so that impingement can come from posture. And so this nice stretch on your posterior capsule, going to do one thing. It's going to help to reset that humeral head back where it should be. Because if the posterior capsule is tight, it shifts the ball forward. Now that's a chronic problem in your shoulder. And that comes, again, just from having a job where your two hands are in front of your face all day. And then we're going to shift to the other shoulder. This will be a tight one for me. And if you notice a big difference between your right and left shoulders, then stretch that one where you can't get it as far across or feels tight. To me, shoulder pain, again, is an indicator that while you perform activity, it is not with the right posture. And so if we truly wanted to get your capsule stretched, we call that low load, long duration stretching, which means you leave it there for a long time, up to an hour. And so, yes, it can't be a high load. In fact, it should be no pain, but like a 2 out of 10 stretch. And that's really not in this class, but if you have an injury and you have lack of range of motion, that is a great way to get it there. It's just put it in a position that you feel a little stretch and leave it. Okay. I think there's only one more stretch on here. Actually, there's not. So we're just going to stand and do mountain pose for the end of it. And so the lower extremity piece on mountain pose is shoulder width apart. I think the picture has your feet narrow. That's a yoga move. Yoga is great exercise. There are really two parts of yoga that I see. There's static and there's dynamic. Dynamic would mean, again, you move in and out of a pose. It's great, it's strengthening. Static would mean you leave yourself in a pose. Not strengthening, addressing probably some contractile tissue tightness. So if you do yoga, the beginner yoga poses there's probably 4 of them that are fantastic. So cat and camel, and down dog and cobra. So those are all kind of addressing your low back. So, disclaimer, but if you go onto YouTube and just put cat and camel, there's a lot of that. Again, I would just go slow and be very careful with it, but those are great exercises. So I want everybody to notice where their knees are. Most of us stand with our knees locked out, and that is a sign that there's postural imbalance. So to stand with your knees not locked out, just draw up on your kneecaps with your legs. You feel it? So take these muscles, your quads, draw your kneecaps up. What does that feel like? Your butt probably automatically tightened. So that's right there. That's a great postural cue. Draw your kneecaps up. Do not stand with your knees locked out. Why do we do that? Again, we always want to do the least amount of work neurologically. So it's a kickstand. Just get on a kickstand. And so if you're practicing mindful posture, talking to somebody, you're going to draw your kneecaps up, tighten your butt, tighten your core, pull your shoulder blades back and down, and tuck your chin slightly. And so from the side, again, you can see everything's aligned. It should be anyway. I don't know. I'm pushing 60, so maybe not. From here, again, we're going to do that thing with the shoulders. Palms forward. Nice deep breath. And so for the next 20 seconds, I'm going to try to get my shirt untucked. Breathe out, come down. And so if you have a group of people you work with, and you can have a leader for the day for micro breaks, great idea. Hey, it's time. Or you just want to be the person demonstrating. I always say if you see somebody with horrible posture, don't say a thing. But if it's great posture, say, thanks for the cue. Or even mirror it back. And if they don't acknowledge what you're doing, they'll pick it up. It won't be at their level of attention, but we all tend to kind of mirror what we see. So, okay, one more time. Nice deep breath. Up we go. I would argue that my kids' generation probably has more issues with posture than any other generation before. And so, always on my kids. Okay?
Is it because of their phones? Why do you think that?
Tech neck, that's one thing, but call it tech neck. But I don't know. COVID.
Thank you.
Any questions? Well, I hope you guys have a great day and a relaxing afternoon after stretching.